The Representation of Transgender Women in the Media by Gretchen Foxglove. Good morning. My name is Gretchen Foxglove. This is my presentation on my final paper, The Representation of Transgender Women in the Media. I'll start with some objective research, why it matters. This is the world that transgender people survive in. There are some startling statistics about the number of trans people who have been harassed, who've attempted suicide, who've been threatened, who are bullied, and who face a breakdown in family relations, all due to their gender identity. The most important takeaway here is the top 80% of people don't know a transgender person. These are some more statistics, just letting everyone see again what it's like to be transgender in the current world. Almost half of transgender people are too scared to use the restroom. A percentage are assaulted in the workplace by colleagues, which you should never feel unsafe in your workplace. When media is negative and inaccurate, which it often is towards trans people, a large percentage of trans people feel angry, unhappy, they feel excluded and bad about society, and frightened about the world around them. However, we know that when the media gets it right, they're presented with positive, accurate media portrayals of trans people, the majority of trans people feel happy and included, they feel good about society, and they're better able to speak about their gender identities to those around them. Media representation, how the story is told. So this section is about the role that media plays in presenting trans people. Earlier in the presentation, I mentioned that about 80% of people didn't know trans people, and this sort of shows you that media representation is how many people know that transgender people exist and know that transgender people, what we're like. So, of the 110 major studio films released in 2018, how many had trans characters? If you guessed anything other than 0, that's incorrect. None of the major films released in 2018 showed trans characters at all, which contrasted to television. In that same year, the show Pose first debuted, which features trans characters played by trans actors, and they are unique and diverse characters, not just flat stereotypes, as well as the DC Comics show Supergirl, which included a transgender superhero. And the contrast here is that when we are presented on screen, transgender people are almost always presented as negative stereotypes. And one of those stereotypes is of the transgender villain. I've listed a couple of examples here. Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs and Angela from Sleepaway Camp are just two of the examples. Then the flip side of that is the victim's stereotype. Transgender narratives often center around violence toward us. It often centers around us being victimized, especially regarding hiding our transgender identity and then it being revealed violently. Boys Don't Cry is a good example of this. The last stereotype that I want to talk about is when transgender women are played for laughs. Um, the example I have here, Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, is probably the one that most people remember as the villain in the movie. Even though she was a villain, she was played for laughs. Lieutenant Einhorn, who is revealed to be the football player Ray Finkel, who then elicits spitting and retching from all the male characters whom she supposedly kissed, I guess, in the movie. And she's played for laughs and shown as kind of gross and disgusting that she was actually a man. And the other big problem that we have is that cisgender people are often cast to play transgender characters. So people whose gender identity matches their assigned gender at birth, they're often cast to play transgender characters, and it gives everyone the idea that we're just basically playing dress up or acting. And one of the excuses that has been used by casting directors is that they want someone who looks more trans, and the idea being that trans women, especially, would just look like men in dresses. And it plays into the false assumption that we as transgender people are lying about our gender identity, and we're just actually, cisgender people in dresses or in suits. If you think about trans men, which are often ignored. And what happens when this hits home? So this is kind of the personal impact that all of this has on transgender people, and for me personally, as a transgender person. I fall into a lot of the statistics about trans people when they see negative portrayals in the media. So feeling sad and scared and bad about society all kind of hits me. In social media, constantly I see trans people portrayed as being mentally ill and predators. We have the bathroom bills that come up that show trans people as predatory because we have to be kept out of the bathroom that aligns with our gender identity. And personally, I don't see people on the screen that represent me as well as cisgender heterosexual people, and that has a personal impact on me because personally, I feel disempowered to be out in the world when most of the people in the world don't look like me. So I'm personally a fan of horror movies, and I wanted to talk about this and mention this. In horror films, there are a lot of transgender or transvestite, which it's an older word that we usually say cross-dressers now. However, for the sake of this presentation, I use that term because that is what most of the studies and articles have used. But there are lots of them in horror films, which is the main genre that I watch, and you see a lot of characters who are either dressing as women or trying to become women in some way. It's usually pathologized, so they are shown as being evil or crazy in some way, and that is usually conflated with their dressing up as women, such as Norman Bates, who dressed up as his mother. He's wearing a woman's clothing and a wig to kill people. I already mentioned Buffalo Bill from the movie Silence of the Lambs, that he would, well, there's no other way to put it, he would tuck his penis between his legs and pretend to be a woman. And that was shown as his way of taking on femininity, as well as he would kill women and make a skin suit of them. And then Angela from Sleepaway Camp was supposedly traumatized as a child and then raised as a girl, and she's revealed at the end to be a boy, but she's the killer in the movie Sleepaway Camp. And all of these characters, as well as some others, are shown as mentally ill and that's conflated with their gender identity.